Digital 410 proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
Welcome everybody to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, your favorite World War II based podcast, and we are here for another fun, exciting night of world travel and tale of all kinds of fun and excitement. Joining us as always, Mr. Henry Sledge. Henry, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. And joining us, as always, from the great big-ass state of Texas, Mr. Jeff Copsetta. Jeff, how you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I wouldn't say as always. I feel like
I didn't want to make you feel bad. I didn't want to point out the obvious to everybody and embarrass you in front of our guests. But anywho, joining us from the great white north, you know him from the HBO Pacific. You know him from his appearances on the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast, Mr. Scott Gibson. Scott, how you doing today, sir?
Very good, eh?
Hey.
Hey.
And the award for the best camera of the night makes all of ours look like we're rocking webcams from 2004. Great job on the technology, sir. You must be rocking an iPad.
It's what an actor has to do, right?
Yeah, gotta look good. Gotta look good. So
that's all it is. Teeth and hair, Don.
That's the key components. Both things that need a good insurance policy. Unless you're a lady, then you got to go with the legs. Interesting fun fact, prior to the hurricane, my roof got reinsured by the same people that insured probably your hair and teeth, the Lloyds of London. So they came through with my insurance payments on my roof, much like they do the actresses' legs who insure them for millions of dollars. Before we get into your goings on, we kind of tease people that Jeff is going to do this from time to time, and we don't do it. And I'd like to throw curveballs to Jeff to see him like shaking his chair, wonder what the hell. Jeff, give a brief synopsis, a little brief, breakdown of your latest model project. It's not exactly World War II, but we're going back to the precursor, World War I. The pilot who's named after the frozen pizza and after Snoopy's character, the one and only Red Baron.
Man, yeah, that is a curveball, because I could have had it sitting here waiting for that.
Should, woulda, coulda, but...
Yeah, like I've said on the show before, and with conversations with you guys, it's really hard to understand the Second World War if you don't quite get the First World War. And it took me a long time to really kind of figure that out. And, it's important for those who just strictly stick to World War II. I get it, because there's so much we want to read, right? There's so much out there. There's so much to know about the Second World War that you don't want to stray. But I went down that rabbit hole, and I've enjoyed it because it's put so much into perspective. So, yeah, as you guys know, I like to do a little historical, history through modeling, I guess you could say, because I don't want to say I still build model airplanes, because, that's for Scott's like, yeah, that's for dorks.
Hey, we live in I don't want to alienate half our audience here, but we do live in a time where it's perfectly acceptable for 43-year-old dudes to go to Comic-Con dressed up like as their favorite comic book character. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with you and your son spending quality time putting together a 1/1/1/1/1/1 scale of a canvas airplane. Tri-wing, correct?
Well, I built his triplane, the famous red DR1, Fokker DR1, or the British called them tripes, and it was Germany's answer to the Sopwith triplane. We were the first ones, the Allies were the first ones to have a 3-plane, triple winger, I guess you could say. So that became just the infamous, like you said, the Red Baron pizza and Snoopy and the Red Baron. It just was like the most famous aircraft that came out of the First World War. And interestingly enough, building this model, doing the research that I do, there's still debate today, 105 years after von Richthofen was shot down, as to what color the underside of his aircraft was. Everybody's just assumed it's all red. And there's a good chance it wasn't. Most experts say that the underside was that light blue, German aircraft underside blue. So that's the scheme I went with, red on top and that pale blue on the bottom, because that's what the experts say. But it's interesting now, we still can't even solve that. We still don't even know. There's some Canadian pilot, right? Some Canuck we give credit to, right? Roy Brown. We give him credit to shooting him down, but it could have been, rifleman on the ground. So
two things. This leads to one of my questions I had when you're talking about people tend to have a more interest in World War II opposed to World War I unless they're longtime historians, which my first question would be, do you think a lack of source material would be for that reason, which would then also include his follow-up? We're arguing over the color of the bottom of his plane because of lack of source material, because of, the infancy of black-white photography at the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's no color photos, so people are really having to dive deep into the shading, and is there a change? Does it look like it's different from the red? And on, and it's stuff that just makes people's eyes bleed. Nobody really cares about it anyway. So just make your best, guess, and try to keep history alive and have fun with it.
What was the technological reason for the tri-wing? Did they think it was more maneuverable? Did it have better lift with a heavier engine? What was the actual technical reason for going with the tri-wing?
Yeah, that's actually a really complicated question. I don't want to waste too much time on it, but yes, for short answer, yes. It was very maneuverable. Had a very short, stubby wingspan. It was a very small aircraft, and I didn't realize how small it was till I put it next to the other ones that I had built. I built a Fokker D7, a Spad 13, and a Sopwith Camel, and the triplane was just minuscule compared to those. And yeah, I guess. But the control surfaces were only on the top plane, The other two were just, and there's no dihedral to them. So, again, it's those things when you think about the technology in 1917 when they first debuted to what we were using not that long into the future, Battle of Britain, for example. So, all of those things, all the pieces fall together, all the dominoes from the First World War to lead us to the Second, and it's interesting to learn about.
Absolutely, and thank you for sharing the photos, and we will also include those, as always, at WTSPWorldWar2.com. But without any further ado, Mr. Scott Gibson, let me ask you a question. When you signed on to do the series, obviously you had a little bit of a hint from what the actors from Band of Brothers had done, but did you ever anticipate that World War II would have such an influence or a grasp on your life after the production?
No.
Short and sweet.
No. At the time being cast and doing that, you're just so wrapped up in, I don't want to fuck this up. And what are they going to do to me over there? And do I really have to do boot camp? And it's Spielberg and Hanks. Yeah.
And I guess the pressure of portraying a real life person opposed to a fictional character's got to be that much more pressure on you.
A lot of pressure, and this is a story that's out there now. I don't, name names, but the actor who was supposed to play John Basilone was fired on his first day of boot camp. They just made a choice, brought John Seda, and just didn't work out. So this guy hadn't even been on screen yet, and he got fired. And these things happen that, obviously not a lot of people know about, but we all felt like, holy shit, if this can happen. So you just wanted to get on screen as quickly as possible on camera, and you're done.
Let's make it more expensive for them to fire me. Tape. We don't want to do reshoots.
They still had to pay him. But subsequently over the years, it's just become bigger and bigger. More people interested, more fans, younger fans, and as a result, it's unlike anything else in terms of being a celebrity. Is the fact that you are representing, someone who fought in the Pacific and European, and it's so incredibly humbling, for one, so much gratitude for it. But also that you're able to get that person's name out there. People understand that story. They watch the series. They read the books. At the time, I thought I do the series and then maybe I get another series, right? As an actor, you think this will propel me into something else, and whether that happens or not, but none of that really matters. I mean, like, this is, the greatest thing I've ever done. And for a lot of guys, the same thing. It's just, you do a lot of stuff that really isn't that important. It's entertaining, et cetera, and so forth. But to do this, and even in Normandy, when I go to Normandy, the people that recognize me for that role is just incredible.
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting to with my first question about, did you ever anticipate having World War II having this much more impact on your life? Because it's been several years since the series, and as we're having you on to explain and give us a rundown, you just returned from a trip overseas that had to do with the topic of World War II, and that's kind of why I was wondering, like, I bet you never really anticipated things going this far, but for those who aren't familiar with your social media pages and your adventures, give us, our audience, a little rundown of trip you just took.
Yeah, I met this group. So I was there last year with Tim Gray and the World War II Foundation. And on that trip, I met Jeff Wells with his group, which is Wishes for Heroes, for Our Heroes. They raise money for active serving duty military in the U.S. So anyone with whatever sort of issue, they raise money, and they have these gala events. So I went to one in San Antonio, I went to one in Milwaukee, and then they were coming back for their second year in Normandy. They rented a chateau, Ile Sainte Marie, which is on the property of, I think, around 1300, William the Conqueror. There's Viking wall establishment there, but the current family, I guess they can trace their history back there about 300 years. And his new group, new charity is Walk Among Heroes. So they bring veterans to Normandy. There's not very many left, but we were there this year with Reed Clanton, who will be 99 in August. And he was with the 84th Infantry, 29th Division. He landed on Omaha Beach. And the other veteran was James Kelly with the 6th Airborne. I think the regiment was the Dublin Rifles, if I get that exact. But he landed D-Day as well. So just a tremendous and very different experience to be there with these guys, because they are so much recognized as heroes there by all the people in Normandy or anyone that goes there. And it just to walk where they walked and to glean any kind of information or stories from them is just incredible,
I see you also had the privilege of meeting Mr. Jake Larson.
Yes. Yeah, that was our first day at Omaha Beach. We went there, I think it was June 2nd, right at around 6:30 in the morning. So we had a very good visual of what it would have been like at that time, with the tide out, the wind and the cold and everything. And we went down to the beach and then went to this restaurant, and Jake was in there. Just sort of, coincidence off this. He was with a bigger group, but for some reason he got in there, and he's 100 and I think he's 101.
Yeah, I think so.
And he could not stop talking about or expressing his gratitude for being alive, because he said his Higgins boat landed, and the only thing that basically saved his life on Omaha was he was able to get to this berm quickly. And he said everyone else was dead. Like, dead. Done. And he he was behind that berm for a while, and obviously, made it out of there. But he said, he was like, why me? Why me? Why did I survive? And I'm so grateful. And he was the happiest, most beautiful man. And I guess if you make it to that point, and you survive that, then obviously, if you reflect back, that's what you would say. I would think. But he just, how lucky am I? How lucky am I? He kept saying that.
And he's sharp as a tack.
Sharp as a tack.
I've had him on the show twice, and I saw his videos back in, I don't know, near the end of the pandemic on TikTok. His granddaughter was putting up one video, and I reached out to him, and he came on, and up till the show, you're like, okay, this guy does 1 minute podcast. Not podcast, 1 minute TikTok. How cognitive is this guy? I mean, he seems pretty on point. And so when you interview vets, you really don't know if you're going to have to pull a lot of information out of them, if you're going to have to kind of go back and edit and put the show together. He is the epitome of brain as sharp as a tack, regardless of what his body's doing. He went for 200 minutes straight and still wasn't done. I had to follow him. We actually had him on for 2 consecutive episodes because he is so sharp and he has so much information. And as you said, he's so happy and jovial. And he's just one of those guys, you just pull that string and you just step back, cross your arms, and just let him go. He is so sharp.
There were these kids that came in. I mean, these girls had to have been, I don't know, 8, 9 years old, French family. And I think he'd met them earlier on in the trip, or maybe the previous year, I'm not sure. They brought him artwork. You've never seen love like he expressed to them and them to him. And because in France, or particularly in Normandy, I mean, these kids they know more about the war than people do here.
Mm-hmm.
And the love that they expressed to him was just like just so beautiful to see and witness. And there was obviously a lot of that around the whole time that we were there. And the ladies loved him.
Oh, absolutely.
He just totally. I mean, he's a stud, and all of them are just. I have a hard time talking to them just because I'm like, I have no idea what to say to you.
He's the type of person, like, God willing, if I live to be that age, I hope I have his personality, his wherewithal, and he's on the ball. And he knows what much like a lot of other veterans, post-war and through the 60s and 70s, they just kind of kept themselves, even through the 80s and 90s. And later in life, as you look around, you see more and more people are passing away, and you see there's more and more renewed interest in original news stories that haven't been told. He, through his granddaughter and 1 minute TikToks at the time, he just started telling these 1 little minute stories, and just they're so interesting. Like, he told the story on the show about the gentleman on the beach who took the hit instead of him, and all the others. There's just so many great stories, and like we did last week, we'll post a link to his 2 episodes along on the episode for this particular episode. But if you guys haven't heard that episode, 2 episodes, go back and listen to Jake. He just goes and goes, and then he surprised me. He sent me a postcard in the mail with his photo from overseas, plus some of his more modern day photos. I actually have his postcard hanging up here in the podcast studio.
He's planning to be back for the 80th.
It's good to have goals. You gotta have reason to get up in the morning,
right?
And that far ahead, and that's got to be. I mean, that's a long flight, right?
Yeah. Well, the Jim, he was over there, and the British guy, he flew over in a glider on D-Day. Yeah. And bringing him over there, the people, one of Jeff's people in England, London, talking to Jim, saying, "Do you want someone to meet you at the airport and bring you over there?" And typical English guys like, "Well, the last time I flew over there was in a glider, so I'll be all right."
Fantastic.
I landed in a glider, so I'll be fine. And this guy was spry. He's turning 97. He works out 3 days a week. I said, "What's your secret to your health? He says, Scott, I eat cornflakes every day. You know, just so British. But and he plans to be back there. And I think there was a group sponsored by Delta Airlines that brought about 45, 50 veterans from the U.S. And next year, I think American Airlines is doing it.
While you were over there, did you guys primarily show up to public speaking events, or did you get to do any battlefield tours?
No, we did. We did Omaha, Utah. The thing that left me, or upon reflection coming back, was that along that Atlantic wall, there were 8,000 bunkers built. 8,000, which is incredible. And on D-Day, they were unscathed. The bombings barely hit. And if they did hit, it didn't do much. So, maybe if they'd have done, if the landing was at night, et cetera, and so forth. But, and the conflict between Runstead and Rommel, because Runstead was in charge and Rommel was brought in to just deal with those landings. And I think it was Rommel that wanted the Panzers to be moved in.
Yeah.
And Runstead didn't, and it was like, well, let's let them come inland and then we'll get them. And the other guy's going, well, no, we'll hit them when they land. And you think, man, if that Panzer division was there, it might have been game over.
Well, a lot of that had to do with the subterfuge on our behalf with the Ghost division and all the purpose-fed intel, quote unquote, through the French resistance about, they're going to land up north. So they really didn't. They had, a lot of them speculate, no, it's going to be down here. The intel was saying up north, and so they kind of were trying to argue over where to position the Panzers. Okay, we're kind of put a little further north, so if they do go north, we can get up there. Or if they're going to go south, and so a lot of that, thankfully, had to do with the subterfuge and the bad intelligence that we purposely fed to them through the French resistance.
When you're there in one of those bunkers on the beach, it looks like it probably did back on D-Day. And the only, one of the bigger ones we were in, there was a Navy shell that clipped the top of the bunker, and then it hit where their ammunition was, and you could see the holes, but virtually the whole thing is still intact. And that was one that had an 88 in it, and you just think of these guys hitting the beach. I mean, it was a turkey shoot, right? For Charles Shea, the medic, Native American medic, and he's got a monument there, and we went to his ceremony, and he was talking about when he landed there on Omaha and rescuing guys, but he got up to the berm and he looked back and he figured there were about 200 guys dead. So all that is just so, you read about it and you talk to people, but when you go there and you really put it into perspective, it's really, really profound.
Yeah, I was thinking you're probably standing in this bunker. We've seen the photos, we've seen the recreations in the movies, but when you're standing there and I'm sure there's a lot of people talking, but if there was a moment of quiet, you probably could figure how eerie it would be to be the German in that bunker on quote-unquote guard duty, and you have the sound of the ocean, the smells coming through, the dampness in the bunker, and then all of a sudden as the light comes up, you just see it in front of you. Like, it's about to get real.
What must they have seen?
Yeah.
Right? Like, just, the bombings are over, and then you're like, okay, and then you wake up at 6:30 in the morning, and you see all that. It's so hard to put into perspective. I even for some of these guys, I hesitate to even ask them, Reed or James, any sort of personal story, any kind of nitty gritty about a day, because I think it must be just so hard for them, really.
Yeah. And the experience I've had of interviewing a handful of vets and the few I've talked to off the air, my whole thing is I try to talk to them about the daily lives of soldiering, whether it's here I don't bring up the combat so much, and then as the story progresses, if they bring it up and start talking about it, then I'll kind of follow up. But yeah, I'm like you. I don't just dive into the nitty and the gritty of it. Jeff actually gave me the book version of The Longest Day, and in the early chapters, a very cool description of one of the German commanders pulling down. They give a beautiful description, pulling down a nondescript road. He gets out. There's a little cobblestone path that curves around in the woods and goes down along the edge of this cliff, and it's very descriptive. And it was just, that was the entrance path to one of those bunkers you're talking about. It's like they weren't some big grandiose thing. It was just, you pulled over in this little pine wood area, got off, walked down this cobblestone. You try not to fall down the cliff because it had a little cable, and boom, next thing you know, you're walking through concrete doors and you're in these bunkers.
And the other thing, I mean, the movies couldn't really, any of the movies couldn't really do this. So much of inland was flooded.
Yeah.
So 101st, 82nd, and I guess not so much the British. They maintained, I think, hitting their targets, but guys land in 5 feet of water and drown because of all the equipment. In order to secure those bridges, the great stories, the Filthy 13, that those engineers that secured some bridges, Pegasus Bridge.
Mm-hmm.
The British took that in about 10 minutes because they landed so close with their gliders. I don't exactly know where Jim landed, but this town that they went to take, and I forget the name of it, but they were getting bombarded from artillery from Canadians. So a major swam across these 2 rivers, connected with the Canadians, said, "Hey, you're gonna level us and kill everybody in this town." And so they stopped. But someone had asked him, what was it like to be under friendly fire? And Jim, again, just, well, I didn't find it that friendly.
Yeah, right.
And that's all he has to say about it. But we went to the monument to his battalion in this little town, and he just stood there in front of it for the longest time, and Jeff was just starting to ask him, like, how do you feel or anything, and Jim didn't say a word, not a word, because it just, you could see it brought him right back. And this is, this little village, and it's someone's backyard, kind of on the road where the monument is. So really, really moving and profound. Like, so I just feel so fortunate to be able to have gone there with those guys.
Jeff, you got any follow-ups?
Man, yeah, I just love hearing it, because Scott and I, we've talked quite a bit, since he's been back, and just hearing these stories is just, man, I can't wait to go, because, it just made me think when you said walk where they walked, just the other day, you guys may have saw, I posted a little today in history about, when General Custer and 5 companies were wiped out the Little Bighorn. And I remember walking that battlefield, and just that eerie, I didn't get it so much at Gettysburg, probably because I was just a little too young when I was at Gettysburg, but being at the Little Bighorn and just seeing, just every now and then there's just tall grass, and every now and then just a headstone that says unknown, not even a headstone, just crosses, just those reminders of what was done there. So I can only imagine. I've never really stepped foot, recently. Of course, I don't know how many people fought and died over the city of Baghdad, right? Millions through the ages. So I don't even know the history. I probably walked right through there and had other things to worry about. But yeah, I couldn't imagine, Scott, especially somebody like you who have really, delved into the subject, have made an emotional attachment to it, in your portrayals, to have that kind of understanding, and then to be there, I couldn't imagine, because this is not necessarily just a crime scene. It's just massive amounts of life that were snuffed out on both sides. Just so many humans taken out. It's just
to see the local people. Like, we stopped at Lafayette Bridge, and we'd met with Helen Patton, who's the granddaughter of George S. and she had invited us to her place, was right beside Lafayette Bridge. And so we got out and doing a little talk. Jeff was talking about what happened, and there was this young kid. I mean, this guy was early 20s, and he stood there for 20 minutes with his girlfriend. I don't know how much he understood or anything like that, but Reed was in the wheelchair, and he just waited patiently and waited and waited and waited, and then we started to move, and then he just came over. He's like, "Could I, and he just, to Reed, like, "Thank you so much." Like, it's so moving, and it's nice, obviously, when people recognize you as an actor for being in these things, and I'm not going to take anything away from that. It's cool, but with these guys, when they wait that long and shake their hands and get things signed and they clap for them, you're just like, man, like they're the real deal, right? They're the real heroes.
It's kind of mind-boggling to me that it's almost like maybe here in America we're having to put forth so much effort and we have to like make history like amazing and sexy and just just ridiculous to make people love it. And it's just inherent in the Europeans that they just, what I mean? Like, it almost seems like, why do our own, basically, the people who inherited what our victors did, what the Allies did generations before us, we should, to me, I feel like, why aren't we so grateful? Because I guess maybe the Europeans have a better understanding because they lived under a different rule and they saw the actual other side of the coin. Whereas in America, we've never actually had to maybe deal with that. In the West, we've never been conquered and then had to retake back.
Yeah, Jeff Wells talked about that a number of times, that there's nothing in the U.S. There's nothing in Canada. There's very little Canadian involvement I think in D-Day celebrations there. Hopefully next year, there'll be a little bit more, and the British as well. But yeah, you would think there'd be more, but obviously that land, territory, people being liberated, and the fact that they, like, it's taught, like, I don't even think it's taught here in as much detail as it is there. Like, those kids are, and they are just in awe, they're, when they see these guys, and next year that might kind of be it.
I don't want to paint with a broad swath, but just based off of a lot of the photos we see when, I have yet to go over there, so I don't know firsthand, but to see photos for like gentlemen like you who are on tour with my other friends, it seems like and Henry's going to be dropping in and out. That's why I was texting. I wasn't ignoring you. He was sending me text messages. He was getting bandwidth alarms, so he just dropped out. But anyhow, it would seem to me that because here in America we seem to just tear down our old buildings and replace them with new shit as much as we can, whereas over there, at least seeing the photos, the progress isn't so overwhelming. That I'm sure when you grow up in a village, in a township, where you're walking to school and you still see some of these stone buildings that have bullet holes and debris in it and things like that, all these years later, some of these towns still suffer from the scars of war. And obviously when that stuff happens to your village, your town, your hamlet, and literally your grandparents or great-grandparents were liberated from the Germans by the Allies, I can only imagine it would have a greater impact on your life than it would over here in our hemisphere, where, yeah, we had family members who fought and died. We gave a lot of materials and goods, but that's a far sight different than having that plus the bombs and the destruction and the actual combat on your grounds. And so it would make sense that they're more up to speed on it.
And it's all farmland.
Yeah.
And small villages. These are not towns that we're going to build suburbs that look modern, or there's not a lot of, when everyone leaves after June 7th, they're like ghost towns.
Yeah.
but all the farmland around there, and then the villages, and the one that was I think it's Angeville de Plaine, but there's a church there that the American medics treated Germans and Americans, and you go into the church. I think a bomb went through the roof, and all the plain glass from medieval times have been replaced. I have to post some pictures about that. But the pews that are still there have blood stains on them.
Yeah.
Huge blood stains. And they're still raising money to, fix the place up. But the villages are so small, but they were the first places liberated in Europe, right? St. Mary-Glise was the first town liberated.
Yeah, I guess the benefits of having farmlands that made for a lot of landing zones for gliders and Air Corps guys. Welcome back,
Yeah.
Henry. Your connection better now, fella?
Say again, Don.
I said welcome back. Is your connection better now?
I thought it was, but
You're
still
coming through
acting a
crystal
little
clear.
bit.
We can hear you crystal clear.
You can
Okay.
so
I'm still getting a bandwidth of low signal.
I got you. Damn technology.
just regular people. The on June 4th they do this flyover around Lafayette, which is such a small bridge, and the huge fight that they had there. But the landing zone for people like 82nd jump, and even regular, if you're just, hey, I want to pay to jump out of one of these C-47s, and you get in the gear, and you go on a static line, and you can jump. This year and last year, they weren't able to do any of that because the winds were too strong. So us, stupid actor guys, we met up with the 82nd Airborne and their company commander, because they have a football game that they do the last 2 years, the 101st versus the 82nd.
Nice.
Which was supposed to happen, I think, a day or 2 days before D-Day, but it didn't. So Helen Patton has resurrected this, and last year the 82nd won, this year the 101st won. And the company commander, the colonel, invited us to jump with them next year, which would be absolutely insane.
When have you actually thought about it to the point like, shit, I'm gonna have to jump out of this plane?
I've jumped.
Okay, so you have experience skydiving then.
Well, just once.
Okay.
That was 3,000 feet with a square parachute. This is out of a C-47 at, I don't know, I think they're like 1,200 feet maybe.
Well, the reason I asked is I had somebody on from the round canopy jump team a couple years back, and they train here on Florida, and so for not too much money, I already have the uniform. I could go train with them, get certified, and jump. But I remember a couple years ago, some of my friends came down from New Jersey, and they wanted to go skydiving. And growing up, I was into all the extreme sports, skateboarding, snowboarding, and all that stuff. And I always had the fantasy of skydiving. Oh, yeah, I'll do it. But when it came down to where we were looking at prices on Google and on the websites, I'm like, I own a business. I got a daughter. My parents rely on me. I'm, like all the what ifs start going through your head. Like, if it came down to it, we drove out there, would I back out of this? And those thoughts never came through my head before growing up. But at this point, once again, I've since closed that business down. But I literally was like, going through the what ifs of all the bad crap and all the people who are dependent on me. I was like, I don't know if I would be responsible for me to go do this.
There's always, the guy we were with who's part of the crew for the tour. He did about 3,000 jumps, and the only thing is apparently that you have to pack your parachute.
Yeah.
Now this guy's telling me it's like, well, it's not that hard. I can teach that in 10 minutes. Like, okay. And obviously,
you're like, no, take your time. Take your time.
Yeah. Can you pack this one?
Tell you what, where's the guy who's been working with you guys for 10 years? I'll pay him to have him pack my chute. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
I can't even fold up my sleeping bag and put it back in the pouch that I got from Walmart when I'm done camping. I don't want to pack my chute.
So yeah, for everything else, all that training you'd have to pay, but this lieutenant colonel was like, no, we'll train you, and then you're like, okay. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be pretty cool to land there in a round. And but there's also always people that get injured.
This is a question for all three of you, because I know you've all done battlefield tours and I've yet to do one of them. When you show up at some of these places, obviously the answer's going to be different on where you went and what battlefield it was, and maybe we'll go around the horn here in answering this, and we'll start with Scott since he's in the middle of telling his stories. Did you find certain landmarks or certain areas were either bigger or way smaller than you anticipated from all the photos and stories and books you've read? For example, Pegasus Bridge, like, wow, I really thought it'd be bigger than that.
Yeah, Pegasus, and it's a replacement bridge that's there. Lafayette is like ridiculously small bridge. I figured like one tank could get across it at a time, but It was so strategic. But the beaches, to me, what is that from Point to Hawk to the last one is what, Sword? The British beach?
Yeah.
That's 60 miles? 65
wow.
miles.
That's a haul. I would expect 15 or 20. I never really thought about it.
No, it's huge. It's and you go, they landed on all of this? Like all of it.
Yeah.
Like 60 miles. And so you imagine all those ships, like you can't I was just trying to process that.
It brings home the logistical complexity of it.
Yes.
Oh my God. I mean, to coordinate that, and of course everything didn't go right, but all the airdrops the night before and the bombing, I was looking, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll go to, rent a car or try and get to Sword Beach at the very end. And I'm looking at it and going, oh, that's going to take me an hour.
Wow.
Just to drive there from where I am. It's like, it's real. I don't know if anybody watching, like you fans, or you want to go book something now anywhere in Normandy, because everything's getting booked up as we speak. And the 80th will be that much bigger with, all the big heads going there. But I'm fortunate enough they've rented that chateau for next year, so.
Henry, what about you? I know you went down to Peleliu and areas in the Pacific. Is there any particular place? Obviously, we're jumping on the other end of the spectrum here as far as storyline goes and theaters, but was there a particular place that you saw that you thought was, wow, this is a hell of a lot smaller than I thought or read, or wow, this is actually a hell of a bigger lot area, and I can understand why the front lines had holes in it trying to protect this place?
I guess I would answer that by saying, we flew into Guam. That was a stopover point before we're actually going to the Palaus. And of course, I know more about the Pacific War history and the chronology of it at this point than I did then. But to see Guam was a lot bigger. 5-star hotels everywhere you look. I mean, I was not expecting that. And then the juxtaposition between that and what I saw in the virginal nature of Peleliu was what really struck me. I mean, obviously, Peleliu's more developed than it was then, but it's still very virginal, I think, compared to a lot of battlefields in the world. But
were the landing beaches smaller or larger than you anticipated? As far as obviously depth is one thing, but width, I mean, the skinnier it is, the more people you're going to be trying to cram in one location, whereas if it's wider, you can spread out. And
I would not say they were smaller just because I'd watched so many documentaries on it, and just watched them again and again and again to just have it so fresh in my mind. So the context and the breadth of that lined up with what I was expecting.
What about the famous bunker?
Well, that was, I really hadn't expected to find that. The guy who was our guide, it was his 7th time to go there, and was pretty sure at that point he had the coordinates on it. So that was probably next to the landing beach, the biggest deal for me. because there were people on that excursion that really wanted to find that bunker.
But the size of the bunker, because when we hear bunker, some people picture huge. Was it? I mean, physically, was it smaller than you thought? Was it a larger bunker?
Yeah, it was smaller because loking down into it, all you saw was there was a lot of water in it and like some cypress roots and things, and the guys I was with, we were thinking about how cool would it be to pump that water out, and really get down in there and
bring a sump pump, boys.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it was not like you could look down in there and imagine walking into it. It was
more like an old cistern.
Huh?
More like an old cistern at that point.
Pretty much, yeah.
What about you, Jeff? What battlefields have you seen? Just have you done any outside of the country as far as World War II? I mean, not yet. I know you're planning on going to Europe, but I didn't know if you'd been over there previous or.
No, yeah, nothing World War II related yet.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, some of the historical places that I've seen where there was combat. Of course, like I mentioned, the Little Bighorn River. I'll tell you one. Again, it's not World War II related, but it's combat, right? And that's
Sure.
the gunfight at the OK Corral. That's an interesting place that is, prominent in history for whatever reason. But going through, I've been there, I think 3 times now, and man, just you cram 9 guys in this area, and it's like, golly, it's such a small. It's it's not even at the corral. Like it's just it was an empty lot between two
gunfight
buildings.
in a living room.
Basically, yeah. So it's interesting to see, and I feel like that's probably going to be, for me, I don't know. I mean, the first time I went to a hockey game, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is small.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that's going to be my reaction to a lot of things because I just see things. I feel like things are so much more vast. I mean, even the first time I walked inside of a B-17, I'm like, whoa. And I think I was like 14 or 15 when I went inside, and I could barely get up into the top turret. Like, this is crazy. It seems so much bigger on TV. So, yeah, I'm excited to see some things World War II related for sure.
Yeah, just like when you watch Fury, the inside of that Sherman seems a lot bigger than it is. That's for damn sure.
Yeah.
Tuna can. So what else, you got anything else? Do you want to, now that you have decent bandwidth and you can actually hear us, Henry, you have any questions for Scott and his trip?
No, I really was moved by hearing you talk about Jake Larson because, I mean, to know that little 8-year-old French girls are aware of this man's efforts and are there to honor him. I mean, I like to hear that, and you want to think that something like that could happen in this country too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it just so that part of it to me, it's just the best part. It's so unbelievably moving. Being there with Jim at the monument to his battalion, but just seeing people, how they relate. I mean, they can't speak English, so all they can do is come up and thank you and can I have a picture, and it means very genuinely so much to them. They're not getting an autograph. It's not a celebrity. They're just you feel that gratitude and you feel that love from the people. And I think maybe the last time I was on here, I talked about being on Juno and someone, because I had a Canadian t-shirt on, and this guy talked to me in French and asked me a few questions, and I spoke to him in French, and then he just thanked me. And I thought, I was like, is he a fan of the Pacific, or just for a gleaming moment? But then I'm like, no, the Canadians liberated this area, and he lives here, and you have all these pictures of Canadian officers, non-commissioned officers, all the different pictures of Canadians there, and you're like, wow, that's really incredible. And
I think you just touched on something I know I've never put two and two together, never thought of. I don't know if Henry or Jeff ever has the aspect of the Canadians helping liberate France. Obviously, you got the French Canadians in Quebec and the relationship there, and never, we never really, I personally never really thought about how much it had to mean to, the Canadian Armed Forces and people of Canada to be part of that liberation of France.
Huge, right?
You're back. Your audio's here.
Yeah. I mean, they advanced quite far, and their whole mission was, go the ports, into Holland, Netherlands. It's surprising how few or how little the Canadian involvement is there. I completely understand the American involvement, and appreciate it, because I wouldn't be there. I wouldn't be doing these visits, I think, without that. And I wish the Canadian involvement would be more, and the British would be more. And I was at the AVA Gala, which was initially sponsored by, I think, the son of the mayor of St. Mary-Glise. And so American Veterans Association, all the bigwigs are there. There were four-star generals from the U.S. there.
Wow.
I think there's only 6.
Yeah.
And Milley was there, General Milley. So I was going to show you guys that. That's his coin there that he
nice
dropped at us. He's a character, for sure.
Coin.
But that was really cool. But yeah, and there was one Canadian guy there, and I think he's attached to NATO, and you just think, man, wouldn't there be a little bit more Canadian involvement or British involvement? And James Kelly, the vet that was with us, he'd never been with Americans before. He'd been to Normandy a few times before, and his reflection was like, oh, how nice they are. I didn't think Americans were this nice. I'd never been around them, so those cultural divides, but within that place and time, and you think, geez, after next year, I don't know. Hopefully there will be more, and certainly for the French there will be more, but I highly hope that anyone can go there.
It's funny you say that, they're surprised at how nice the Americans are. I think we start to get a bad rap overseas.
Yeah.
Not to hammer on TikTok too much, but there's 2 gentlemen from the UK who got a pretty big following over here during the pandemic and all that, and they just came over here and kind of did a little tour from Florida to Texas and Georgia, Mississippi. And both their takeaways is like the Americans that are represented to us on the news and our media every day is not the Americans that they're going on their pages and saying to their followers in the UK, like, hey, we've been lied to about the Americans. They are the nicest, sweetest people we've ever met. And they're like totally, and they're coming back for 4th of July. But it's like, I'm starting to think, well, apparently they're not showing our best representation on the media and TV over there, because everybody I've talked to who meet Americans from over there are quite surprised how nice we can actually be.
Absolutely, and all the people that were, the people that bought tickets to go on this tour, like from San Antone. I mean, just so nice and so thoughtful and appreciative. And how many opportunities like that do you get in life every year? I don't know. It's just it's so wonderful. It's really, really wonderful.
Jeff, you got anything to add?
Well, I wanted to ask Scott, if you don't mind. You had told me a story about your grandfather,
mm-hmm.
and just a little snippet of his service during World War II, and it's an amazing story. I don't know if you'd mind sharing a little bit of that.
Yeah, so his father had a I don't know what you call it. Shipping business. His father had a boat that he would take supplies to the North Shore of Quebec from Nova Scotia, and his father died when he was about 17. So he had to learn that business, how to sail. Eventually, he joined the RCMP Marine Division, and he was chasing rum runners in the 30s. And then the war broke out, 39 for the Canadians. So the RCMP Marine Division was taken over by the Canadian Navy, taken by the British. And he ultimately captained 9 different ships in 6 years. And he sunk 2 subs. He was the first Canadian frigate to sink a sub in the North Atlantic in 1943. And he also sunk one on a convoy in the St. Lawrence. And he was awarded the DSC, which was in the Commonwealth. I think that's the 3rd highest.
Using depth charges?
First time I had heard about a U-boat being in the St. Lawrence River. I mean, that's incredible. That's a little too close for comfort there.
It's as deep as the ocean is. That's the people that and he was on this big convoy on a minesweeper, and there'd only be 2 ships within a convoy at the head and the back that could fight or do anything, for lack of a better word, right? There wasn't 6, 7 ships. That's all they had. So he was at the tail, and this sub sunk, I think, 4 or 5 of the ships. And he finally got it, but wasn't able to any debris or prisoners, so he didn't get credit for it. He had to carry on. The one in the North Atlantic, the British ship was the head of the convoy, and he's at the tail in the frigate. And then, his sonar guy, detect something, so peeled off. Right? They do a circle, send depth charges. Nothing came up. Did it a second time. Nothing came up. And then he wanted to do again, and the Nini, the British ship, the guy, the commander of that one, said, "No, just return to the convoy. We think it's experts agree it's porpoise. Return to convoy." And this was in the transcripts that I had. And my grandfather just said, "Give me one more shot." So, okay, and he went off, sunk the depth charges. The sub came up. They sank it. And then he was getting all these congratulations from the other ships. And then my grandfather wrote back to the lead British ship. He goes, "How about your experts now?"
Now, obviously, the primary damage was caused by depth charges. You said it came up and then they sank it. What did they use for the crippling blows on it?
So that the frigate had the Oerlikon gun.
Okay, Oerlikon. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't know what the shells, like.
Yeah, they're huge.
It'd be a 40 millimeter, wouldn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, and it came up and they blasted it, and but my grandfather had nightmares about that for the rest of his life. These, young German kids in the freezing Atlantic just screaming for their mothers, and he did. I think this was just a bar story maybe, but he said the commander of the sub got up on the deck, spit, and went, "Heil Hitler," and my granddad got him a mop and made him mop the whole deck. Might have been a story, but still, that whole naval part of it too, and guys in the water like that, it's just.
I'm not sure
horrific.
if this is 40 millimeter, but this is a wooden naval training round that somebody gave me a long time ago. It's got the same weight, but it's a wooden shell. They use these in the Navy for training instead of, when they didn't have live rounds. But I wonder if this.
That's big. That's bigger.
Yeah.
Than the Oerlikon.
Sadly, it's not stamped, so I'm not sure exactly the size of it. I used to know, but I plumb forgot.
But that's the other thing, being at Normandy, and
this is 50 cal.
Some of the the guns that the Germans had, that you could shoot 35 kilometers. I mean, that's insane. It just.
Right.
You can't. There's not enough time when you go there to you could spend weeks and weeks or months, but I just not so much the weather. The weather can be a little shaky, but just the people, the environment, the history, that part of the world. I can't get enough of. Really.
How many days did you spend over there last trip?
10.
So even in 10 days, not enough time.
Not enough. I wanted to get to. I'd like to get to Vimy, which is a big thing for Canada in the First World War. That train ride was, I think, like 6 hours from where we were. You know, not enough time. I've not seen either of the British beaches. I've not seen any of the German cemeteries there, which I'd like to visit. You know, it's just so huge. Like, it's just, you know, in a movie or a book, it might seem small, but oh my God, that's just a huge area that you think, man, if this thing failed, where would we be?
And then you think about that size, and then you put in the consideration the Blitzkrieg and how fast they were moving.
Yeah.
Wow. And then you can understand, oh, now I understand what they mean by outrunning your supplies. You know, getting too far out in front of your supply train could definitely slow you down. But yeah, I mean, size, and granted, we had Jeeps and Deuce and a halves and all that, but the Germans, you know, they had their tanks and their half tracks, but a lot of their stuff was still, especially later in the war, they're still relying heavily on horses, and to cover that much ground.
I just, like, if you bomb that beach and those bunkers that much, you would think the majority of them would be knocked out, and virtually none of them were. That's astounding, right?
Yeah, we also got to consider the amount of new pilots and new soldiers in general who didn't have, you know, obviously we sent a lot of them who had the experience from the African campaign, but so many of them were just new to it all, and new technology and everything. It's just moving that many people that quick with that much new technology. And as we've heard before, that's part of the reason why some of the beach landings were so bad, because the key part of the planning was we're going to bomb these big-ass craters in the beaches to give our guys a place to hide. And a lot of those bombs missed the targets, and so their key defensive position as far as covering from those aforementioned bunkers and machine guns, there was nothing there to hide in.
So you guys will all be there next year?
I wish. I would love to. I would have to. I just completely, my brain locked up on even the notion of, I would love to get out to one of those, whether it's Europe or the South Pacific. It's definitely on my bucket list.
Well, I'm going to Hawaii in December. That's our first Pacific event, honoring a couple veterans that are still around. Hopefully they're around at the Aviation Museum on Ford Island.
Nice.
Yeah.
We had a young lady on a few years back who revisited the Arizona area and down in Pearl Harbor, and gave us a pretty good first-hand account of seeing those memorial sites and all that. But yeah,
I think the last survivor of that died today, actually.
Really?
Yeah. It was on my feed. I think the last guy that, yeah. But that's, another thing for the Pacific. There's so little that you can do, experience, or, try to commemorate other than Pearl Harbor. Peleliu, the 80th, that'll be in August this year. Next year.
It was on your timeline today, but dateline May 26th, so last month.
Was it? Okay.
Hold on. It's one of those pages where like they try to make you sign in. 101-year-old is the last survivor of. I'm sorry, that was an interview of him being the last survivor. But yeah, let's see here. I'm trying to see when he passed away. So it looks like they interviewed him last month. Nope, you're
Yeah, it was something just today.
Yeah, because that's going to... Oh yeah, Ken Potts, one of the last survivors. He passed away 3 months ago. But yeah, I think you're right. I'm just trying to find the news story.
I was also just reading, I don't know if you can get to this part about books there, but
Well,
Sold
we'll
it.
we'll get right into it. I gotta. If I don't enter it correctly, we'll get a bunch of hate email because for some reason people like the way I say it. So, I'm just gonna start with you, Mr. Scott Gibson. What you reading?
Well, Devil Dogs by Saul David. A little forward there from Henry Sledge, is it?
I think I'm familiar with that name.
Have you heard of that guy?
I think I might know him.
Beautiful forward, my friend.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm early into it, but well, he's got quite a nice flow in his narrative in terms of piecing things together and figuring out the interpersonal stories and his own perspective on. It was interesting. It's like he said if they'd have lost Guadalcanal, they'd have had to surrender. You know.
Yeah, everything was on a knife edge at that point.
That's it, right. Those two,
know.
Guadalcanal, D-Day. Those things don't go right. Wow.
Yeah.
So different. But yeah, I'm really just been getting into it since I got back there. But yeah, Henry, that was great forward, man. Seriously.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mm. If I write a book about my life, I want you to write the forward. You can make stuff up. And the movie, Jeff will star in the movie. Jeff will play me in the movie without his mustache.
No, I think he has to keep the mustache. We'll take artistic licensing for people that know that in your off time you rocked a 1939 mustache.
I had the stash.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the part I'm playing is this Major Goldstein with the Pathfinders, and I just feel like Major Goldstein would have a mustache. So,
sounds like
we haven't started filming yet, so I'm practicing, but it's pun intended, it's growing on me.
Nice.
It is growing on me.
Major Goldstein sounds like he was a Dapper
I don't
Dan
like
man
it.
for sure.
What's that?
I said Major Goldstein sounds like he would have been a Dapper Dan man for sure.
Right. That's what he's going to be.
Whether he wants to be or not. He's not a fop guy. He's a Dapper Dan man. Jeff, what you reading?
Man, there's always that oddball, and it's me. I'm reading Fire at Sea by Thomas Gallagher. This is not a World War II book. I'm sorry, but It's a great story. This is about Fire at Sea is the mysterious tragedy of the Morro Castle. The Morro Castle was a passenger liner that in 1934 caught fire and beached in Asbury Park, New Jersey. Just off the kind of one of those main piers where there was a lot of people hanging out, just watching hundreds of people burning to death without any way of getting help to it, and the ship was there for a few years in Asbury Park. It was just kind of a an ocean liner that would go from New York to Havana, Cuba for 5 days, and it's I was kind of drawn to this in a museum at the New Jersey Maritime Museum when I was up there last year. There was a whole exhibit. You walked in and it was like, oh, this must be like Titanic. That's the first thing I thought of. But everything in this maritime museum, of course, had to do with New Jersey maritime history, right? So there was some stuff. There were some pieces of subs, German U-boats, that had washed ashore there, and some of the stuff, World War II related. But it just seemed very Titanic-esque. But then reading, the panels on the wall and looking at the artifacts, like, oh, there was another ocean liner that tragically, sunk, and a huge loss of life, and just never heard of it before. But it's an interesting story because the captain was poisoned to death at supper time, and the night before they were supposed to come to port. And then about 5 hours later, it mysteriously catches fire. And so it's an interesting kind of a whodunit mixed with a tragedy at sea. And I haven't gone through the whole book yet, but I know I've pieced together enough of the story in the museum that it was arson from one of the radio operators, and he made it. He came home like he was the hero until people really started piecing it together, especially by the 1950s, and he was being questioned while he was at the New York State Penitentiary for murder of 2 different people. So this guy was a real character.
Yeah, sounds like a stand-up fella.
Interesting. But it's like all these things that line up that had to go wrong, that he knew how to take advantage of. So it's an interesting story. I mean, it's history, right? 1930s. It's interesting reading about the maritime laws and how things were done and how we thought we were not going to see another Titanic type disaster. And yeah, the Morro Castle is every bit as disastrous as the Titanic, for sure.
Was it? Well, it was probably a smaller vessel, though, right?
Oh, it was. Yeah, it was a smaller vessel. There's about 300 passengers, 200 crew. A lot of the crew had World War I experience. Navy, World War I, escort, convoy duties, things like that. So interesting to kind of hear their history.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy to think that you could survive something like being on a naval ship in World War I and then dying in an accident like that on a trip from Havana to New Jersey.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it sat there for years till finally somebody made an effort to move the dang thing, because it just rotting bodies inside, and it's just crazy.
We're going to try real quick. Henry's internet's dropping out on him. Henry, before you go, what you reading?
I'm just about to finish up Volume 3 of the Untold trilogy, Twilight of the Gods.
Is it wrapping up as well as you thought it would, as far as the series goes?
I think I'm losing you.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. That's all right. We're getting ready to wrap it up anyhow. I'm still, I had to take some time off, just crazy, how life goes. So I just now, 2 days ago, jumped back into 4 hours of Fury. So I'm getting back into that.
Night.
As Scott mentioned earlier, I'm just so intrigued about the glider riders. I don't think there's been enough about that part of the airborne, and they deal there's a lot of good content about glider riders in this book, and so that helps keep me intrigued. But Henry's internet's getting a little flaky, and we're about ready to wrap it up anyhow. So before we go, Scott, you got anything coming down the pike you want to promote?
Well, there's a couple, cheesy Christmas movies.
Hey, we all love a good cheesy
Hallmark Christmas movies. Yes, Chef is one, starring Tia Mowry. She was Sister, that show years ago. The other one I can't remember. But I'm doing this event in December in Hawaii, and if there's any way we can hook something up and chat with the other guys or do something live.
Sure, we'll make it happen.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love that.
Oh, we love it too.
Specific content, and maybe if we can get any the vets there as well, or just be connected to that Q&A, that'd be great.
Yeah, you got my email. We'll talk about it after the show.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got anything coming down the line?
Well, really, the biggest thing I'm looking forward to is seeing Scott in San Antonio in September. Doesn't get any better than that.
You're going?
Yeah, I'm going. Told you the other night I'm going. They ain't changed.
You're not far. It's a
Oh,
bit of a drive down, I think.
When you fly into Texas to hang out with Jeff, you got to fly into San Antonio. That's where I flew into.
That's where you fly. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Reed will be at that event.
Right.
And they have a lot of vets. Pacific, Vietnam. It's really incredible.
Yeah, I can't wait. It's gonna be a little bit of an effort to peel my wife off of you when we're there. So
I was gonna make the comment that I think your wife's probably more excited to meet him than you are, but I didn't want to go there, just because his connection's getting crappy. Henry, before you go, do you got anything to promote?
Yeah, I'm starting to correspond a good bit with James Holland about the We Have Waves History Festival in England in September.
Wow,
So
that's right around the corner.
Yeah.
We'll have to try to make something happen over there, too.
Yeah,
WTSP is about to go international, ladies and gentlemen. But that's going to wrap it up for this episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt podcast. We want to thank each and every one of you for your continued support of the show. And if you want to support the show a little extra other than just listening and sharing it in social media, please head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. You can get yourself a sweet WTSP t-shirt like the one Jeff's wearing that has the, I believe, the lunch K-ration kit, or my new one, as well as many, many others. We got jackets, we got coffee mugs, we got Everetang. And while you're there, you can also click on the Patreon link, sign up and subscribe. It'll cost you $1 a month. There's 2 other plans, but we don't care about that. We just love to have that $1 a month. That'll go a long way to support what we do. Or you can just head over to youtube.com, find Digital 410 or D410 Media. Either one of them will get you there. Like, subscribe, watch some of our videos, and that'll help go a long way as well. For myself, Mr. Jeff Copsetta, Henry Sledge, and the wonderful Scott Gibson, we want to thank each and every one of you, and we will talk to you all next week.
This has been a Digital 410 production.